Hey Connor, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's the best time of year for me. So I couldn't be happier. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Tell me about your career.
Yeah, so really I didn't start. I mean, I was writing a lot in high school and a little bit in college. And my day job isn't writing, but coming out of college, I just needed an outlet to start writing. And growing up in Connecticut, I gained a love for college basketball. It's my favorite sport to watch, to talk about, to cover. And so I got a position writing for bustingbrackets.com, and eventually became somewhat of their West Coast college basketball uh, expert. Um, and when Eli Becker from Heat Check CBB approached me to join his site, and Eli and I had been friends for a couple of years, I jumped at the opportunity. Obviously, my podcast co-host Brian Ralph joined shortly thereafter, and we have a couple of other guys that are really good writers that did join, and it's been a slow growth. Both on Twitter as well as people reading my work, listening to the podcast. But for someone who um, isn't, with one of the major networks, or isn't a former athlete, at least at the collegiate level, I couldn't be happier with the amount of people that respect what I have to say and want to read what I have to say, and just being able to put my ideas and my thoughts out there on a weekly, daily, monthly basis is something that makes me kind of fulfilled in terms of covering college basketball, and I've had some good connections with some former players, current players. So it's one of the most fun, and I'm going to call it a hobby, one of the most fun hobbies that I have right now.
All right. What advice would you give to someone coming into the sports media world?
Just be yourself. We see a lot of people out there who they have a shtick, and it works for them. And a lot of them though develop that after they've made it, right? They put in the time, the work, the energy, the effort. And it's truly just an extension of themselves. And I see a lot of people out there that try to um, come up with the shtick before they put in the work, or they've really found their own voice, and it doesn't work for them. But if you can be yourself, if you can grind, if you can have good relationships with other writers, other analysts, people, players, if players have begun to start, if they notice you and they start respecting what you have to say, that really helps you kind of grow the amount of people that follow you and know who you are.
All right. Let's go through the bracket. Let's start with the West region since that's where you're expert. Let's start with the ones. Let's start with the West region. Tell me, who do you think is going to win it and why?
I think the West region sets up perfectly for Gonzaga. We at the end of the day, Gonzaga is the best team in college basketball right now. You can make an argument for Baylor, you can make an argument for Illinois, but this region sets up pretty well for them. And there's not really a team there that has all the pieces required to beat Gonzaga. Iowa and Creighton are probably the closest, just because they like to shoot the three ball. And so if they can get hot from three, there is a chance that they can score enough points to knock off Gonzaga. But Iowa doesn't have the athletes to be good on both ends of the floor. You saw late in the season in the Big 12 play, they became an adequate defensive team, but their offense suffered. And then in the tournament, you saw their offense pick it up, but their defense then suffered. So I think, from that perspective, and the perspective that I don't even know if Creighton makes the Sweet 16 to face Gonzaga, I think that the West region sets up pretty well. And there's a reason why Gonzaga has the highest chance of making the Final Four of any team in the tournament right now.
What upset do you see in that region if you had to pick one?
If I had to pick one that I'm pretty confident in, it would be probably that Ohio over Virginia matchup. Because I think Ohio, the way that roster is constructed, they have multiple shooters, which is something that you need to have to beat the pack line defense. And Virginia won't be able to practice until like the day before the game. So I just think that from that perspective, Ohio is going to come out hungry. Virginia just they don't have that one gamer that you can trust to put up a ton of points, right? They don't have a Kyle Guy type player that you can trust to start out scoring a lot of these players for Ohio, specifically Jason Preston. And so that's the one that I'm the most confident about. I do like UC Santa Barbara. I like USC to make a run at the Elite Eight. But from the perspective of like that one first round upset, that is the most confident that I'm the most confident in. It is that Ohio over Virginia pick.
All right, for the East region, give me the team you believe that'll come out of the East.
So I have Alabama coming out. The East region is really interesting because there isn't a single team in that region that I trust to come out of that region. Michigan, I would have said, 2 weeks ago that it was Michigan, but they struggled down the stretch. They are without their leader in Isaiah Livers. He's going to be on the bench, but he's not going to be on the floor with them. And there's just a lot of different teams that have an offense that I think can score enough on the Michigan offense to prevent them from coming out of that region. Florida State has been too inconsistent for me to pick. They have a lot of length. They have a lot of athleticism. But again, they're a team that I could see getting beat in the first round. I have them going through to the Sweet 16, but I could see them getting beat in pretty much any round in this region. Texas and Michigan State have both been really good to end of the year, but they've had their own issues. Texas's backcourt sometimes doesn't seem to be in sync, and Michigan State just they don't have a really cohesive roster. Alabama plays with so much fire, and I understand that they live and die by the three. But Nate Oates has made it clear that the three is just what they're good at. If they're not hitting the three, they're going to try and get those layups. Free throws, layups, and threes. That's what Nate Oates wants every possession to end with. And I don't see them losing before the second weekend. And I think once they get there, they're going to have too much momentum, and they're going to make it to the Final Four.
All right, what potential upset do you see in that region?
I think the only upset that I have in this region right now is Michigan State over BYU. If Michigan State were to beat UCLA in the first 4 game, they have a lot of athletes, and that's why. I mean, BYU is a very good team, and they're very good at slowing the game down. They're very good at playing in the half court. The teams that beat them are the teams with athletes, and so I think that from that perspective, that's an 11-6 upset. Michigan State is playing really well. BYU just doesn't necessarily have the athletes to keep up. I think, you can get upsets later. Like I have LSU beating Michigan because I think LSU scores enough to upset Michigan without Livers. But in that first round, there's not really an upset that I like. I think UNC Greensboro would have been a great upset pick against any team that didn't have Scotty Barnes as a point guard. Abilene Christian against Texas is a possible upset, but I just think Texas is too hot. So yeah, I'm going to go Michigan State over BYU.
Let's move to the Midwest region. Who do you have coming out of that region?
I still have Illinois coming out of this region. They have for a team of its caliber, for any of the 1 seeds, they will have the toughest road for them heading to a possible national championship. Drexel shouldn't be an issue, but both Georgia Tech and Loyola Chicago like to turn you over a lot. Tennessee does as well. Oklahoma State doesn't really turn you over all that much, but Cade Cunningham is always a factor. San Diego State likes to turn you over. West Virginia does. and then you've got Gonzaga and Baylor, who both also like to turn you over in the other regions. So their road to a national championship is by far the hardest. They are a fantastic team and have the best duo in the country in Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Coburn, but they are a relatively lazy team when it comes to their passes and their cleanliness on offense. They've lost the turnover battle in over 50% of their games. So if you can get past this region and Baylor and Gonzaga get knocked out, I could see them cutting down the nets, and they probably are the second most likely team to do that. But from the standpoint of just the way that they are playing right now, I couldn't not have them coming out of that region, despite the fact that this region is almost tailor-made to have them upset in one of those first 4 rounds.
All right. What if you have to pick an upset or a team to maybe make a run in this region? Who would you pick?
So the biggest upset I have in this region is Oregon State over Tennessee. Tennessee is an interesting one because when they're on, they're really good. But the issue has been that they struggle to score a lot. They either score a boatload of points or they don't score at all. Oregon State is hot. They have nothing to prove. I mean, this is was a dream for them heading into the postseason. They have a couple of 3-point shooters that can make things interesting. I think Warith Alatishe is a better undersized power forward than Tennessee's Yves Pons. Both of them are extremely physical. I just lean Alatishe. And then we don't know how effective John Fulkerson is going to be in this game after he had the surgery for the facial fractures that he suffered in the SEC tournament. So I'm not 100% confident because Oregon State could always revert back to the mean. But Oregon State's been a team that has beaten, really good teams when people weren't expecting it. So I think they're a 1 win and then lose type of team. But that would be, I think, the most favorable kind of upset in this region. Rutgers Clemson is another one. I think that's a pretty fair one to make just because Clemson has the same issue as Tennessee where they struggle to score a lot. So those would be my 2, I think, Rutgers and Oregon State.
All right. Now let's transition to the final one, the South, right?
Yep.
All right. Who would you have coming out of the South?
I have Baylor coming out. I think teams show up in the NCAA tournament. Teams become who people think they are or were in the NCAA tournament. And Baylor, for the first 80% of the season, was the clear second best team in the country. They had the COVID pause. They fell off. They really haven't been able to get back there. But their first 2 games shouldn't be that difficult. I know that they have the size mismatch against both Wisconsin and UNC, but their guards are just too good to make that a huge issue. And then, moving forward, this bracket in the South sets up really nicely for Baylor. Just from a perspective of it kind of gradually eases them into what would be their toughest matchup in this bracket in Ohio State. But even Ohio State, I just don't really trust to handle that 3-headed backcourt of Baylor effectively.
All right. What potential upset do you see in this region?
I mean, the easy one is Winthrop. And I think the Winthrop upset is the most popular 12-5 upset. It might be the most popular double-digit seed upset in the tournament. They have one of the best point guards in Chandler Vaudrin, who is also one of the smartest players and is 6'7". Villanova is without their star point guard and Colin Gillespie. So I think that one, it reminds me a bit of that UC Irvine, Kansas State upset a couple of years ago where everyone had that upset. People were like, well, if everyone's jumping on it, it's not going to happen. And then it happened because K-State was without their best player and they were facing one of the tougher mid-major teams in the country. I know a lot of people jump on the Utah State Colgate bandwagons. Colgate runs the same exact style of play as Arkansas. That game's going to be exciting. It's going to be up and down the court. I wouldn't be surprised if both teams score in the 80s or 90s. But when you play the same style of play as another team, and the other team is bigger, faster, stronger, jumps higher than you, the other team is at such an advantage that I can't see Arkansas losing. I could see Texas Tech losing because they are notorious for losing close games, and Utah State has probably the best defensive big man in the country. But uh, I just don't know if Utah State's backcourt can score enough to overcome what Texas Tech will do in terms of just making this game a wreck. Texas Tech is not an efficient offensive team, but they are very good at making games ugly. And so that one, Utah State over Texas Tech, is probably another good one to pick. But you have to truly believe that Utah State can keep their composure when Texas Tech makes these things really difficult to do.
All right, and now who do you have winning it all?
So I have Gonzaga over Alabama. I think that is going to be the better game in the Final Four. Alabama can shoot the ball really well. They are a very fast-paced team, which is what Gonzaga does. Their teams have issues with Gonzaga, not necessarily always because their offense is fantastic or their defense is really good. They have issues with Gonzaga because Gonzaga makes you play so fast that you make mistakes. Alabama likes to play that fast as well. I just think Gonzaga is too efficient offensively, and both teams are really good defensively. On the other side, I have Baylor over Illinois. I think that at some point, Illinois' laziness with the ball is going to catch up with them. And when you're facing the best defensive backcourt or the backcourt that was for 90% of the season, the best defensive backcourt in the country, that's where you're going to get beat. You're going to get beat. They're going to turn the ball over. They're not going to be able to finish. I understand that there's the height difference, and Kofi Cockburn is going to dominate bigs if he gets the ball. But Baylor, Gonzaga, the two teams that seemingly have that size disadvantage at the 5, are going to front Kofi Cockburn every time Illinois comes down the floor. They're not going to be necessarily worried about stopping him from making a basket so much as stopping him from getting the ball. So I have Gonzaga playing Baylor. It's the game we deserve. It's the game we all wanted to see. I think once we know that Baylor's returned to form, it will be the game that we want to see moving forward. And I have Gonzaga winning. There's just something about this team where they play with such selflessness and at such a high level that you could tell me any of their 5 starters won the tournament's most outstanding or Final Four most outstanding player, and I wouldn't be surprised. We saw Jalen Suggs come up big in the game against BYU when BYU was shooting lights out. Gonzaga turned their defense on, went on huge runs. Jalen Suggs fueled that. Corey Kispert is one of the best shooting 4s in the country, if not the best shooting 4 in the country. Drew Timme, as a big man, has some of the best footwork in the country. So whether he faces Baylor or whether he faces Kofi Cockburn, I don't think that offensively Drew Timme is going to have much of an issue. What's going to happen for him is that if they face Illinois, he might have some trouble on the defensive end. But again, I don't think he's going to set himself up for a lot of fouls just because he's going to be fronting Cockburn a bit more than what I think people are expecting. But yeah, I think they can run multiple offensive sets. They can run the pick and roll really well. They can run well in transition. They create a ton of steals. And I just if there is a season where Mark Few wins the national championship, it's going to be this year. And this team just has that vibe about them that when it comes down to it and they need to win, that's what they do. So I have Gonzaga over Baylor. But I think that game is going to be really good for at least 35 minutes. But Gonzaga is probably going to go on a run to end that game. And they will finally bring a banner to Spokane.
All right, here are your sleepers of the tournament. If you had to give me maybe three teams you think can make a run to the Final Four.
Um, so from the perspective of going deep, I'll give you one in each region. I think USC is the clear sleeper in the West. They have one of the top three picks in the NBA draft on their roster, a solid group of guards, and Evan Mobley's brother Isaiah Mobley is one of the most underrated postmen in the country. Their bracket sets up really well. I think Mobley is better than David McCormack for Kansas. And since we don't know if Jalen Wilson is going to play in that second game against them, that takes away kind of the one mismatch I see with Kansas against USC. And then Iowa, Luka Garza is fantastic, but USC has the players and the roster to match up with Garza without needing to double, which is going to make the guards on Iowa a little bit tougher for them to score at the level that they're used to. From the East, it's tough to call Florida State a sleeper. I mean, I think it's LSU. I just think LSU has a favorable run for a team that's not in the top 4 seeds, if they can get past Michigan. And they're going to be, if they get to an Elite Eight and they're playing Alabama, they're going to be looking for that revenge. And I think that motivates them. I still think Alabama wins that game, but LSU for me is probably the one team outside those top 4 seeds that I could see making the Final Four. For the Midwest, I think it's San Diego State. Oklahoma State's going to be a popular pick. West Virginia is. I'm not really in on Houston. San Diego State, I think if they can get past West Virginia, that sets up really well for them because they can beat Houston. And if Illinois makes it to the Elite Eight, San Diego State is one of the toughest matchups for that Illinois squad. So I think San Diego State in that region of the 5 through 16 seeds probably has the best shot at making a Final Four. And then in the South, I don't really see a sleeper. I think it's going to be one of those top 4 seeds. So I'll go with Purdue since they're the 4 seed. If Purdue can get past Baylor, and I think Purdue sets up relatively well to at least give Baylor a game. They're looking at Ohio State or Arkansas. I think they are a mismatch for Arkansas. And then as far as Ohio State goes, those teams know each other extremely well. They play each other extremely physically, and Purdue can win that game. But I don't think Winthrop can run to the Final Four. I don't think Utah State can do it really either. And Florida and Virginia Tech have their own issues to work out. So you're looking at that 8-9 game where nobody really likes UNC or Wisconsin to go much further than maybe beating Baylor. And then Purdue. And Purdue is one of the most underrated. I mean, they are the most untalked about top 4 seed in this tournament. And so they're a team that with Jaden Ivey, with Travion Williams, with Zach Edey, who is just a marvel in terms of his body. I think Purdue could make a run to the Final Four. And I know a lot of people that have them in the Final Four for that reason.
All right, finally, who are the players of the tournament, in your opinion, that people should keep an eye on?
I mean, the easy ones, right, are you've got Mobley, Garza, Suggs, Io, Cade Cunningham. But if you're looking at kind of those March heroes, the ones that lead their teams to do, great things, I think you're looking, in the West, you're looking at either a Ja'Cory McLaughlin for UC Santa Barbara or Jason Preston for Ohio. In the East, you're probably looking at like a James Bouknight, and UConn can win a couple of games. I don't know if it's likely, but Bouknight can win a couple of games. I think he was the best player in the Big East, and the only reason he didn't win or tie for Big East Player of the Year was because he did miss time. In the Midwest, Um, Jordan Shackle is probably the one that comes to mind. Again, San Diego State, excellent player, can hit those big shots. You've got Cameron Krutwig also for Loyola Chicago. He's one of two players that is still on the team from the Final Four team that the Ramblers had. And Buddy Boeheim for Syracuse. Syracuse, if Buddy Boeheim is scoring, Syracuse is unbelievably good. If Buddy Boeheim isn't, then they probably lose. So Buddy Boeheim might be the biggest X factor in that region. And then in the South, Chandler Vaudrin is probably the one to watch. I think he's going to be the one that people know the name of. Neemias Queta being the other one, the best defensive player in the country, at least from a big man perspective for Utah State. And I wouldn't be surprised, win or lose, if he has 5 or 6 blocks on Texas Tech players trying to attack the rim. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of names to watch. And there's a lot of people covering the sport that have put out top mid-major players. Oral Roberts has the highest scoring player in the country. So it's going to be a fun tournament. There's a lot of individual battles I like. There's a lot of team battles I like. And it couldn't set up any better. I think the 68 teams they picked were the right 68 teams. And I think that the brackets they put together lend themselves for a lot of excitement.
I have one final question. I'm a Memphis Tigers basketball fan, and we didn't make the tournament. I want to know your perception on the Memphis Basketball Tigers program, and what do you think Penny Hardaway has to do to make them relevant again?
I think what he has to do is he has to surround himself with assistant coaches who know how to coach. I get it. He was a fantastic player. He knows the game of basketball better than probably 99.9% of the people, even in the sport. But he just, there's just something about having an experienced coach on a team that you can't really replace. Michigan is the perfect example of this. You have Juwan Howard, who is an excellent player. He knows how to recruit, and Penny Hardaway knows how to recruit as well. Both excellent players, bringing in a lot of talent. The X factor is Juwan Howard has Phil Martelli in his corner, helping him coach this team. Martelli's been a successful coach in the past. He knows how to coach basketball. And so you've got kind of this tag team, right? You've got the player coach in Juwan Howard, the one that is guiding the players, telling them how to be successful in the sport, telling them what they need to do, how to react. It's something that Penny Hardaway's good at. It's something that Damon Stoudemire is good at for the University of Pacific. Then you've got Phil Martelli, who is the experience, I guess, at the coaching position, the one that Howard can lean on when he needs someone to bounce ideas off of, to help him call plays, to really know the ins and outs of that coaching atmosphere. And that's why I think, you could say that Juwan Howard is the coach of the year, and I think he is, but that entire Michigan basketball staff is probably the best coaching staff this year, just from the perspective of what they've been able to do. So I think from the Memphis perspective, I mean, they're recruiting at a high level and they have the talent. Just surround yourself with, one other coach that has been there and can help you. And even if you're the guy ultimately making those decisions, you can bounce ideas off of someone who can talk to you at the same level. And that's something that I think Penny Hardaway should focus on in this offseason.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I agree with you. And particularly, I think he needs to find an offensive assistant, because the offense has been the problem. The defense, they're one of the best defensive teams, but they just struggle to score points. And I don't care how good defensively you are, especially in today's basketball game, you got to be able to score. And
that's the thing, is that if you're looking at all three of those coaches that I named, Pacific is a above average, really good defensive team. And they run a lot of ISO ball, get your shot up. Memphis is one of the best defenses in the country. Again, they run a lot of kind of get your own shot type of plays. Michigan's the only one that really runs plays for each other. And again, and I think they're really good defensively, but they also run plays for each other. And I think that's the key. And that's the thing that Memphis needs to, get a handle on, because the talent that Memphis in terms of Memphis team in terms of talent is probably top 30 in the country, and a clear NCAA tournament team. But from the perspective of, again, like you said, that offense and just playing together, they need that one coach that can really get them to do that, because it's tough when star players go back to coaching, I think, and try and tell players that they shouldn't be the star, right? But Gonzaga, again, and I talk about them a lot, but I think they're the perfect example. You've got a top 3 player, or a top 3 player in the draft, top 5 player, we'll go with that, in the draft, in Jalen Suggs, who is the 3rd option in most games for Gonzaga. And he is willing to be the 3rd option in most games for Gonzaga, unless he needs to step up. And just, I never really got the sense that Memphis found that top dog, and had that hierarchy and ran plays for each other and got players open. And so it's going to be, I think next year it might be a little bit rough too, but we'll see.